4 tools for retirement planning. We're going to do a whole retirement planning series, right?
Yep, so this will be ongoing. If anyone's come out to the seminars at Harvard Community College or anything like that, it will be that broken out into 4 or 5 parts, digging into a little more detail as we go.
Right, we've taught this at many corporations around the area, universities. We teach it at Johns Hopkins quite often, CCBC, State of Maryland Pension, system. So this is a seminar we've been doing for quite a while. There are 34 questions we've developed that most people need to know the answer to on retirement planning. That's how we developed it. But always the first step is you need 4 tools. Correct. In order to do your retirement planning. We're going to talk about those. So any of our listeners out there that are serious about their retirement planning, these are the 4 tools that you absolutely must have in place to prepare for retirement. So let's go through those. Tool number 1, ways to collect.
Yeah, so this is...
You guys always have surprises for me. Go ahead.
If we don't answer your questions or if you're intrigued to learn more, we have on our website, we call it the Education Center. You go there, you can see articles written by Drew or myself or anybody else on the team.
There are a lot of really good articles that just came out.
Yeah.
Mikey wrote one just recently. Graham wrote a good one just recently. I put 2 out there just recently. That last one about understanding stocks, I really think helps to for people to get a feeling about what stock ownership's all about when they go through these bear markets. It really can rattle the nerves. But anyway, go ahead.
Yep, there's a good chance if you have the question about it, we have an article on it. And if not, this dialogue will pop up if you go to our website, and you can enter your own custom message, and we can reach out and try to help you in any way we can.
Yeah, and we get those questions, that helps us to formulate ideas of what we might want to write articles about in the future for all of our, because if it's a question that really seems broad enough, we feel that maybe all of our clients would like to hear the answer to this, so we write a whole article on it. So anyway, so here are the 4 tools. This is where we wanted to start. There they are. Goals. What goals do you have what do you want to accomplish? What risk are you willing to take to get to accomplish those goals? What's your balance sheet look like? Balance sheet is what do I own right this minute? Who do I owe right this minute? The subtraction of the 2 is my net worth. And it's the net worth that's going to carry us through, plus Social Security, plus pensions if you have it. And the last one is cash flow. Keeping track of where you're making money and where you're spending money is the most important of all the tools. And I'm not talking about budgeting. I'm just talking about keeping track of where but we're going to talk about that in more detail. But that'll be later. So
with goals, so a big tool that we use is Money Guide Pro. And Money Guide Pro is...
I think we're going to show a little more about that. But it's goal driven. What do you want? What do you want to accomplish? How many cars are you going to buy for the rest of your life? Weddings, college. Do you still have college for kids, or are you going to do college for grandkids? Is that a goal of yours? Do you have a big goal to leave money behind? Right. That's a inheritance question. Is probably one of the most significant questions. The client that says, I'm going to try to spend the last nickel, which everyone knows they can't do, but they really have no concern whatsoever about what's left behind at the end. We can do planning one way, then the client has a really strong goal to leave money behind to the next generation. It's a totally different scenario.
And it's also important to talk about these goals with the partners themselves.
Yeah.
You make sure you're on the same page.
We get that... matter of fact, I was just with clients just not too long ago where one wants to go to Florida and one wants to stay here where the grandchildren and the brothers and sisters are and so forth. And you get that a lot where the 2 spouses are not necessarily on the same page as to what they want for their long-term goals. I remember years ago, Alex, that I had clients come in, the husband starts talking about their goals and he's in Florida already in his mind. Golfing. He's golfing, playing, hanging out in Florida. And she's, just trying to get retired and figure out what do they want to do in retirement. He's already got it figured out, it's usually best to do this goal planning together as a husband and wife. So,
Yeah.
but we're going to look more at the goals. Let's go on to this. So this is something
Yep.
that you're really an expert on, is Money Guide Pro.
Yeah, so this is something every client that was already with us or that has come in since we started using this tool, we try to have a plan in for them. And this helps kind of, you get to model out what you want to see in retirement. So we always put in basic living expense and health care. And
Right.
that's kind of every
Those are
year.
our needs. We need to hit those every year.
Yep. And then we're able to put in wants and wishes. And you see up there, it can be cars. If you want to start a business, maybe a vacation home. You can get that Florida and that Delaware that we were talking about before. Yeah, anything you want to see, we're able to put it into the software.
Yeah, and when you put all that model in, not only what they need on a monthly basis and so forth, but what type of money they want to spend a year on traveling, what type of major celebrations or weddings, how many cars are you going to buy? Do you want to do major home improvements? Do you want to buy a second home? What do you have an elderly parent that you're going to have to help provide care for? We can model all that in here. This is a very powerful program, and I really think it's one of the best software programs that we've been able to develop or use in our planning process with our clients. And I don't think we've had a client yet that hasn't been fully appreciative of what it does for them.
Yeah, it's nice because it's interactive too. So maybe they haven't thought out some of these goals. This kind of gets that ball rolling.
And gets them, and it helps them to think about the things that they ought to. You might not think of home improvements as a goal in retirement, but if you feel you're going to renovate your kitchen or your bedrooms or your bathrooms or whatever, and you're going to spend $50, $60, $70, $80,000 doing it, you need to budget that in, because the lump sum of money that you have has got to last. And if you borrow it, it doesn't feel like you spent $80,000, but you still spent $80,000. We have to budget that in. So Money Guide Pro is a great tool. There are other places you can get those kind of tools.
Yeah.
But then what risk do you want to take? What if you had major inflation? Are you ready? Get that client that comes in and says, I just want all my money in CDs that, for 5 years I can get 2% or whatever. Well, what happens if inflation takes off? It's not going to keep up with inflation if you invest money without expectation of inflation. Is it a concern? Is it a risk that you're concerned about? What if you have a big liability case brought against you for a car accident, or what if you choose no survivor benefit on your pension, and one of that spouse who's getting the pension dies prematurely? Have we thought that out? And every spouse, every married couple, one Social Security, the lower of the two Social Security, is going to disappear. Will that have an impact on the surviving spouse to make ends meet? What if you have long-term care expenses?
And Tom likes to point out when we do the seminars together, life insurance. The risk with life insurance is, if I were to die, people would be sad, but no one's going to be devastated financially. But if I get disabled, then I become quite a burden on whoever's taking care of me at that time.
That's true. So if somebody passes away, and you've got it figured out that the surviving spouse has enough Social Security and assets to live on, you're absolutely right. All you got is the funeral expense, and that's $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 depending on what your desires are. But when somebody comes disabled, long-term care, custodial care, it's not covered by Medicare and medical insurance. You're talking $125,000 to $150,000 a year possibly, and the other spouse who's healthy still has to live on 50, 60, 70, 80, 100,000 also. So all of a sudden your bills skyrocket, and it could drain the assets down, and then somebody passes away. The one in the nursing home passes away 3, 4, 5 years later. They've drained 3 or 4 or 500,000 out of the accounts, and now you have to live for the rest of your life on what's left over. It might not work as well. You need to be thinking that out.
There's a lot more risk out there than strictly investment.
Yes, most people think of investment, but that is a risk
Yes.
that we have to take into consideration, no doubt about it. So what risk are you willing to take? One of the main concepts of investing, to sit here in this seminar and say, do this or do that, you get that. People, tell you exactly what you should invest in. That's ridiculous because, the investment horizon is always changing. You never know what tomorrow brings. So what I like to do is teach general principles that are pretty simple to grasp and help you to protect yourself from bad ideas. So I call this one the universe of investment. It's the risk-free rate of return versus everything else. So basically, the way it works is you look at, well, what is the safest investment I can invest in? The answer to that, to a U.S. citizen, is the Treasury bill. The Treasury bill is a relatively no risk of default. There's people that want to think that the United States government has risk of default. It really is no risk of default. They print the money that the note is written in, the U.S. dollar. The interest rate is adjusted every so many weeks or months, depending on how long you put it out. So if rates are rising, you're going with it. If inflation is rising, you're going with it. And you get your money back anytime you want it. So there's instant liquidity in a Treasury bill. So it's the risk-free rate of return. Right now it's yielding about 2.4%. So why is that important? Well, it's important because if that's the safest investment, the only reason I would venture off to a different investment is either I'm sold into something, or I logically think it out and say, I believe this investment has the probability of making me more than 2.4% rate of return, right? And if it does, or if I believe that it does, I'm going to make that investment. But, how many people hear about something that seems to imply that they're making a lot more money than 2.4%, and there's no risk to it at all? It's pretty simple, it's 5%, 6%. You have to understand, when somebody is saying to you a rate of return higher than the risk-free rate of return, why are they saying that? Is it true? Is it logical? What's the risk to it? Like, give you an example. When I developed this concept, it was 1984. The Maryland S&Ls were offering 12, 13%, but the federally insured banks were only offering 8 or 9%. Well, and the risk-free rate of return at that time was around 7.5 to 8%. So, immediately the flag goes up and says there's something wrong with the Maryland S&Ls, that they're offering so much more than the federally insured banks. So what was it? And by doing the investigation and the homework, I found out that the Maryland Savings and Loan Insurance Corporation was really nothing. It really wasn't able to protect a run on those banks, and the state of Maryland wasn't behind the MSSIC, and so therefore I came to the conclusion that these banks would go under because there was the interest rates were ballooning, and therefore it was warning that investors were getting cautious, so they were offering higher and higher rates of return to lure more and more people back in. But that game can only go on for so long. And so once the run happened, boom, they blew up. And you knew it was going to happen because of this universe of investing was warning us of that issue. So this risk-free rate of return is an important thing to understand, and always know what the Treasury bill rate of return is before you invest in anything. And anybody's telling you something is better than the risk-free rate of return, make sure you really understand it. And annuities right now are the big, because they're acting as if they're getting 5%, 7%. They're getting bonuses and all this kind of stuff. Well, when you do the homework, you realize what misleading information these annuity companies are offering to people. It's totally misleading. There's no truth to those rates of return, but it's a game that they're able to play right now. But the universe investment warns you about it. So, we're looking at the different types of investments that are you going to be conservative? Are you going to be growth oriented, growth in income? Are you going to be aggressive growth oriented? Normally somebody in retirement wants to focus on a portfolio that will achieve their goals and objectives without a lot of volatility. Mm-hmm. And that's where Money Guide Pro comes in again, right?
Yeah, and that's something we're able to model out is, maybe you feel like you have to take on amount of risk, a certain level, and we can kind of say, well, actually, we can dial it back a little bit. We can maybe go 50-50 or whatever the number may be and still achieve your goals and maybe reduce the stress you might have day to day.
Right. And when you say dial it back, you mean bonds that aren't necessarily as volatile as stocks.
So dial the risk down.
Yeah, but there are always investors out there who are willing to accept that volatility. And even though they don't have to, they might choose to. But it's understanding what volatility you're able to take, and also understanding what rate of return you have to achieve, and then developing a portfolio that will help you to get to that goal as best as possible. Mm-hmm. So here it is. As I said, it is the number one tool of all planning. It's the cash flow analysis. This is really just keeping track of how much money did I make and where did it go? How much did I spend on haircuts? As you can tell, I spend a lot of money on
that's
haircuts.
Bi-weekly there. And you do practice what you preach with this. I mean, you're in here most mornings.
There you go.
Recording everything you spend.
I do. I have a very detailed analysis, and I could go back to 1992 and tell you every nickel I've spent. I'm sure you weren't even alive in 1992.
You were doing that 2 years before. So it's quite a long time.
I was. But it's important, because when you see numbers cumulative on things that you spend daily on, it gives you a better perspective. So in other words, if I go to the grocery store and spend $70, and I have $1,000 in my checking account, it doesn't seem like I did anything, bad, right? I spent $70. I have $1,000, so it's no big deal. If I go out to dinner and I spend $25 or $30 and I still have $500 or $600 in my checking account, it's no big deal. But what if I did that every day? Or what if I did that 3 times a week? Or what if I did it 2 times a week? And I total it up, and throughout the course of the year, I spent $5,000 on going out to dinner. And my total income was only $75,000, let's say. Is that a percentage of my income that I'm willing to accept on a yearly basis in my expenditures?
Yep, and it doesn't tell a lie. It's not a fun tool to look at, but you get in the habit of it, and eventually that's just something you keep checking in on.
I'm convinced that Starbucks wouldn't exist if everybody had to keep track of their cash flow analysis, because, you don't think of anything of going in and spending $2 or $3 here and there. But if you do that every single day, you take $3 a day, 7 days a week, that's $21 a week. That's 5,000 some dollars a year. Is that an acceptable, is $1,000 some dollars a year on buying a cup of coffee something that you can and you feel is justified? There's nothing wrong with spending that money, right?
Yeah.
But it's like I always say, live today for today, but be sure tomorrow's going to show up. Well, if you're not maxing out your 401k, but you're spending $1,000 a year, if you're not putting anything in your 401k, but you're spending $1,000 a year on buying a cup of coffee every day, I'd say, you got to rethink what you're doing, because tomorrow's going to show up.
Yep.
And that's the only purpose, is know that you've got today covered, but you also got tomorrow covered. And anybody who focuses solely on tomorrow is wrong, and anybody who focuses solely on today is wrong. You've got to get into that middle, and that's what the cash flow analysis helps us to accomplish. And you can see one of the big purposes of the cash flow analysis is to also come up with that budget for retirement.
Yep.
What was one of your things you had on Money Guide Pro, right?
Yeah, that basic living expense. And I was working with someone last night, and the output that Money Guide Pro gives us is only as good as the inputs. So whenever we say, well, how much do you think you need in retirement? If you don't know what you need right now, it's very difficult to even think about what that number could be. And that's where, you have this amount of cash flow needs right now. What expenses are getting taken out in retirement? Are you driving to work? Are you commuting all the time? Maybe your gas goes down. Some cash flow frees up. You're not contributing to retirement accounts. So it's not cookie cutter. This is pre-retirement and post-retirement. You have to kind of think about how that number is going to change. And really the only way to do that is just start tracking it right now.
Yeah, you get your cash flow and you look at it and you say, my auto expenses are this. Well, in retirement, you're right. I'm not going to drive as much, or I'm going to, right now, my travel budget is limited because we don't take a lot of vacations because I work a lot, but when I retire, we're looking to go on 2 or 3 vacations a year. But my dry cleaning bill is going to drop down because I'm just going to wear blue jeans from now on, and T-shirts. You could just see me in a T-shirt.
Right? I don't think I've ever seen you in a T-shirt.
Anyway, what debt do I have? So there's the fourth tool here is the balance sheet, and this is this tool is really important. It's the snapshot of where I stand right now, and it's looking at I have this much money in banks. I have this much money that I owe. Well, what interest rates am I paying? What interest rate am I getting on my money I'm saving? What am I paying on debt that I still have outstanding? Now, somebody who's debt-free, great. It doesn't matter, right? But let's say I have $50,000 in a brick-and-mortar bank savings account. What am I yielding on that?
0.01.
0.01. If you might get 0.2 if you have a lot of money in that bank. But if you had credit card debt outstanding, what are you going to be paying?
Yeah.
The lowest it's going to be is 6 or 7%, unless you're doing one of those 0% transfers, but they only last a few months, maybe a year at the most. Sooner or later, that rate's going to be 6, 7, 8, 9, 15% or something. And if you're getting 0.01 or 0.2 or whatever in a bank account, why are you keeping that? And the answer to that is psychological. Because, Alex, the foundation of all planning comes down to this. What you think about money is going to determine everything you're going to do with and for money. I was with a client. They have a good bit of money in a bank account. And, we were talking about buying a car. And he was like, well, I want to borrow the money to buy the car. I'm not going to pay cash. You got plenty of cash in there. Why wouldn't you? You're not getting much rate of return. He goes, oh, well, I need that, as my emergency, and it's like, well, if you borrow the money, then you have that debt outstanding and you're paying interest to somebody. Why wouldn't you and then pay yourself back? If you want to make a monthly payment, pay yourself back. It'd be a lot cheaper. But that psychology of how people think and the biases that they have need to be considered. You have to, when you're doing your planning, you have to challenge all of your biases that you believe are sacred when there may not be as sacred as your mind is telling you they are. Maybe you grew up in a family where that was an important thing. Maybe you just experienced something in your life that made you feel that it's an important thing. But that the concept of why do we believe the things we believe, and the biggest one that I always ask clients about is, do you believe money's powerful? Well, if you lift money up here to say that it's really powerful, just think of what you're going to do with and for that money because you believe it's your power source. You need to put money in a place where it's a neutral tool. It's not powerful, but it's an incredibly good tool. Like if you said to me, go out and dig a 20-foot deep hole in your backyard, I'd love to have a backhoe, right?
Yep,
it's a powerful tool. But it's a tool. It's not going to do anything unless I control it and so forth and determine what I want it to do. And so that's what money is. It's an incredible tool, but it's a neutral tool. It's not powerful. What we do with money is powerful. And that's the important thing that we're looking for. So these are the 4 tools. That's what we're, our first segment. If you do any planning, these 4 things have to be thought out. And after you think out those, or look at those 4 tools, what am I trying to accomplish? What risk am I willing to take to accomplish them? Am I keeping track of my cash flow? You can go to a site like mint.com, right?
Yeah.
Put your credit card username and password in, put your checking account username and password in, however many you have, and it'll just automatically input a lot of that information as to what's gone on in the last few months.
Mm-hmm.
And then all you have to do is go in and say, oh, that was for groceries. And it'll even know some of them.
Yeah, it auto-categorizes. It'll mess up the occasional
and
gas or money. But...
And they won't know what your checks were written for, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you'd have to go in and say, oh, that check was for this and that check was for that. And, you could come up with that. So there's lots of things. And then lastly, where do you stand financially? What do you have in assets? What do you have in liabilities? Yep. The 4 tools, the most important part of planning, getting those 4 tools right. So anything else?
No, I think we touched it. There's all of our info. Once again, if anyone has any questions, feel free to type in, or if they come to you later, our phone number's on the website. Shoot us an email, whichever is easiest.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you for joining us.